There is a certain heaviness that comes when the heart senses absence, an absence not of a person's body, but of their presence. You can sit beside someone and yet feel as though you are miles apart. You can hear their words, but feel no warmth in their tone. Love, when genuine, is alive. It breathes through every glance, every gesture, every silence. And when it is absent, you do not need to be told. The soul is an honest witness. It knows before the mind is ready to accept. This is not about paranoia or overthinking. It is about recognizing the unmistakable signs that someone's heart is no longer invested. So you can choose dignity over denial, truth over illusion. Let us look closely at the 5 truths you will notice when someone doesn't truly love you, and how understanding them can protect your peace and guide your choices. There is a truth the heart perceives long before the mind dares to speak it: the absence of energy in someone's presence. Love is not merely a word spoken or a promise made. It is an invisible current that flows between souls, a quiet electricity that binds 2 people even in silence. When it is alive, you do not need grand gestures to feel it. It exists in the way they turn toward you, in the unspoken awareness that you are part of their inner world. Their attention is not strained or manufactured. It is drawn to you as naturally as the tide is drawn to the moon. Even without words, there is a sense of belonging, of being seen, of being held in a space that is both physical and spiritual. Yet there comes a time when that current begins to wane, when the bond that once felt unshakable begins to feel strangely hollow. You sit beside them, but the air between you feels different, thinner, colder, void of the warmth it once carried. They are there in body, yet some essential part of them seems to have slipped away. Their eyes no longer rest upon you with that unspoken recognition. Instead, they flit past you, as though searching for something else, or perhaps avoiding what they no longer wish to see. The sound of their laughter, once vibrant and alive, becomes a mere echo, lacking the spark that once set your heart alight. This absence is not always abrupt. More often it arrives quietly, like the slow fading of daylight into dusk. At first, you may tell yourself that you are imagining it, that people simply have moods, that the heaviness in the room is due to external stress or passing distraction. And sometimes that is true. But deep within, you feel something more permanent shifting, as though the soul of the relationship has already stepped outside the door and left only a shadow in its place. To understand this, imagine a flower deprived of sunlight. For a time, it may still stand tall, its petals holding their form, its stem resisting the inevitable, but gradually, without the life-giving warmth, its colors dull, its fragrance fades, and its vitality ebbs away. From a distance it may appear unchanged, but upon closer inspection, the truth is undeniable. The life force that sustained it is gone. So it is with human connection. We may still go through the motions, still occupy the same spaces, still exchange words and gestures, but without the energy of love, the relationship is like that flower, technically there, but no longer alive. There is a certain cruelty in this realization because the external world may not validate what you feel. Friends may tell you it's just a phase. The person themselves may insist that nothing has changed. But the body knows. Your nervous system picks up on the subtlest cues. The microsecond delay before they respond, the lack of warmth in their gaze, the way their body angles slightly away from yours. These are not just physical shifts. They are reflections of an inner withdrawal, a quiet severing of the emotional thread that once tied you together. What makes this so painful is not just the absence of love, but the memory of what it once felt like. You remember the days when their presence alone could calm your storms, when even silence between you was rich with connection. You remember how a simple glance could make you feel chosen, how their energy seemed to wrap around you like a protective cloak. To lose, that is to lose a part of yourself, not because they were your only source of worth, but because love, when real, integrates itself into your sense of being. Its withdrawal can feel like a piece of your soul has been quietly taken. Many endure this phase by convincing themselves that if they just give more, try harder, become more patient, more attractive, more agreeable, the current will return. But love's energy is not revived by desperate effort alone. It requires reciprocity, a mutual willingness to invest one's spirit into the bond. If the other has already turned inward or outward towards someone else emotionally, mentally, spiritually, your love alone cannot resurrect what has been abandoned. Just as the flower cannot bloom without sunlight, you cannot thrive in the absence of emotional light, no matter how fertile your own soil. The tragedy is that we live in a culture that teaches us to value appearances over essence. As long as the relationship exists, on paper or in social display, we are told it is intact. But energy does not lie. Two people can be photographed smiling and yet feel galaxies apart inside. The deeper self will always recognize the dissonance. There is also a paradox in this awareness. The very sensitivity that allows you to detect the absence of energy is the same sensitivity that made love so beautiful when it was present. You cannot selectively numb yourself to pain without also numbing yourself to joy. Thus, to fully live and love, you must be willing to see the truth, even when it wounds you. If you find yourself in this place, it is tempting to demand proof, to corner the other into confessing what you already know. But often, the most profound confirmations do not come in words. They come in the spaces between words, in the unguarded moments when the truth slips through unspoken. It is in the way their touch becomes a formality, in the way shared laughter feels forced, in the way your presence no longer seems to alter the rhythm of their inner world. And yet, there is a strange gift in such clarity. For when you see clearly that the energy in their presence is absent, you are presented with a choice: to remain in the shell, sustaining the image of connection while starving your soul, or to step away and seek a place where love's current flows freely once more. The first path will slowly erode your spirit. The second may break your heart in the short term, but will ultimately preserve your wholeness. In the end, the energy of love is not something we can fabricate or command. It arises naturally when two souls meet in openness, care, and truth. And when it fades, no amount of pretending can disguise the emptiness it leaves behind. The courage, then, lies in honoring what you feel, even when those around you cannot see it, and trusting that your life is not meant to be lived beside a silent, withering flower, but in the presence of a light that nourishes you completely. There is an invisible thread woven through the words of those who love us. It is not the vocabulary itself that carries the weight, but the life within the words, the warmth, the attention, the willingness to enter another's inner world. When love is present, language is not simply a tool for passing information. It is a bridge, a living conduit that reaches beyond the surface into the heart. Even the most ordinary question, "How was your day?" becomes a vessel carrying the subtle intention. "I want to know you. I want to be where you are. I want to feel what you feel." Such words, no matter how small, open a doorway between two minds, allowing one to step into the other's reality. But when love begins to retreat, this life within the words slowly evaporates. The bridge remains in form, but it becomes brittle and unused, like a path overgrown by weeds. The words still arrive, but they feel mechanical, as though recited from a script without care for the audience. What was once an invitation into the other's heart becomes a mere transaction of sound. There is no hunger to understand, no curiosity, no warmth, only the shell of communication without its soul. This change is often subtle in the beginning. Perhaps the tone is slightly flatter, the pauses between responses slightly longer, the eyes not quite meeting yours as they once did. The words are correct, polite even, but they no longer carry the invisible hand that once reached out to hold yours. You may try to ignore it at first, telling yourself that people get tired, distracted, or stressed. Yet deep down, you feel that something essential is missing. It is like hearing a familiar song played without emotion. The notes are all there, but the music is gone. There is a difference between speech and connection. A stranger might say, "How are you?" while walking past you without slowing their step. It is a ritual, a habit, a performance of politeness. They do not truly expect, or even desire, an answer that ventures beyond "I'm fine." But when someone who loves you asks the same question, they lean in, their eyes soften, and their whole body listens. You sense they are prepared to receive whatever you offer, whether joy, pain, or confusion. The same words, yet two entirely different realities, one transactional, the other transformational. I once knew a man who spoke of the moment he understood his relationship had ended long before the final goodbye. Months before the separation, he noticed a shift in his partner's speech. Conversations that had once stretched into the night, weaving through ideas, memories, and shared dreams, had become little more than logistical updates. Dinner's on the table. The bills are paid. Don't forget to lock the door. Functional, efficient, but empty of the subtle exchanges that once made them feel alive together. The heart of the dialogue had gone silent. There were no more discussions about their hopes, no more spontaneous laughter over meaningless things, no more invitations into each other's thoughts. It was as though they had become co-managers of a household rather than companions of the soul. That silence between the lines often speaks louder than any shouted argument. It is not the absence of words that hurts most. It is the absence of the desire behind them. Two people can speak all day and still be strangers to each other if they are no longer willing to reach across that inner divide. True intimacy is not maintained through the mere exchange of sentences, but through the shared intention to understand and be understood. When this intention disappears, even the most eloquent speech becomes a performance for an audience that no longer exists. This loss of meaningful words does not always signal malice or deliberate cruelty. Sometimes it is simply the result of emotional withdrawal, a subconscious retreat when the bond no longer feels alive. The person may not even realize they have stopped speaking from the heart. But the effect is the same. The listener feels the distance, the lack of emotional weight in the words, and begins to wonder if the connection they once knew was ever real, or if it has simply slipped away without warning. Words, when they are alive, are carriers of the soul. They can restore the wounded, strengthen the weary, ignite passion, and soften grief. But when they become mechanical, they no longer nourish. They pass through the air without entering the heart. And in the absence of such nourishment, the relationship begins to wither, much like a plant denied water, not because the form of care has disappeared entirely, but because the essence of it has. The danger here is that mechanical words can create the illusion of communication. One might say, but we talk every day, without realizing that what they exchange is not connection but maintenance, a daily checklist rather than a shared life. A relationship built on such speech can persist for years, even decades, yet leave both people feeling unseen, unknown, and unloved. The tragedy is that many accept this erosion as inevitable. They tell themselves that passion fades, that deep conversation belongs only to the early stages of love, that the practical matters of life naturally replace the curiosity and wonder of the beginning. But this is not entirely true. While the nature of love's expression may change over time, the absence of genuine curiosity is not a sign of maturity. It is a sign of disengagement. Mature love is not silent. It speaks in ways that adapt to life's seasons, but it never ceases to reach for the other's inner world. When someone's words to you become mechanical, it is not simply a change in tone. It is a sign that the bridge between you is in disrepair. And unless both people are willing to rebuild it, plank by plank, with honesty and vulnerability, it will eventually collapse. The absence of meaningful speech is not the root problem. It is the symptom of a deeper truth. The energy, the presence, the mutual investment that once animated the words is no longer there. We often think of love as an emotion that can be measured in moments of passion or sacrifice, but it is also measured in the small, daily exchanges, the way someone listens, the way they ask, the way they respond. Love hides in those subtleties, and when it leaves, it takes them with it, leaving behind only words that sound right but feel wrong. If you learn to listen not just to what is said, but to how it is said and what it seeks, you will recognize the difference. The absence of meaning in words is not something the mind alone detects. It is something the soul feels, and once you feel it, you cannot unhear it. The silence beneath mechanical speech will echo in you until you decide whether you will live with the hollow sound or seek once more the living language of love. Love, when alive, is not merely a feeling that floats in the background. It is an active force expressed through effort. Not the kind of effort that drains or exhausts, but the kind that flows naturally from the value we place on another's presence in our lives. When someone truly loves you, they do not keep a ledger of their actions, nor do they wait for the right time to give. They give because the act of giving is a joy in itself. They notice small details others might miss. The way you take your coffee, the songs that make you close your eyes, the subtle look you give when you are overwhelmed but pretending to be fine. They make space in their day for you, not because it is convenient, but because your happiness is woven into theirs. In such moments, even the smallest gestures carry immense weight. A message sent in the middle of a busy afternoon just to say you are missed. A favorite snack brought home without being asked. A change in plans so they can attend something important to you. These are not grand sacrifices, but they speak a silent truth. You matter enough for me to step outside my own rhythm and move in yours. This is the kind of effort love inspires effortlessly. Yet, when love begins to fade, this quiet devotion withers. The rhythm changes. What was once a natural impulse to reach toward you becomes something they do only when it aligns with their own convenience. They call when they have free time, but they no longer make time. They show up only if it does not require them to rearrange their own priorities. The extra mile, which they once traveled gladly without thought, now seems too far. At first, you may dismiss these changes. You may tell yourself they are just busy, that life has gotten more complicated, that they still care but in a quieter way. But if you are honest with yourself, you will see that the balance has shifted. You are the one planning, the one remembering, the one adjusting, while they simply receive. The reciprocity that once made the relationship feel alive now feels like a one-sided offering. Psychological research confirms what the heart already knows. Thriving relationships are sustained not by rare grand gestures, but by consistent micro-acts of care. These are the small but deliberate moments when one person affirms the other's place in their life. It may be something as simple as sending a good morning message, offering a warm embrace without reason, or listening fully to a story that matters to the other person. Such acts are the heartbeat of intimacy. When they vanish, the relationship begins to starve, not because the body of it disappears overnight, but because its spirit is no longer being fed. And here lies a crucial truth. the disappearance of effort is rarely due to forgetfulness. It is not that they suddenly forgot how to be thoughtful, how to make you feel seen. It is more often a reflection of where their heart now resides. Effort naturally flows toward what we value. When someone treasures you, they will find ways to express it regardless of how busy or tired they are. But when that treasure is no longer felt, they no longer feel compelled to invest their energy. There is a painful irony in how effort fades. In the beginning, love often drives people to go beyond what is easy. They will stay up late to talk even when they must rise early the next day. They will cross the city to see you for only an hour. They will rearrange their plans because they cannot imagine missing a moment with you. And because such actions are born from genuine desire, they do not feel burdensome. But over time, if love weakens, the same actions begin to feel like obligations. What once brought them joy begins to feel like an inconvenience. I recall a story of a woman who realized her partner's love had cooled not because of an argument, but because of the absence of these effortless gestures. In their early years, he would surprise her with coffee on mornings she had to leave early for work. He would remember the names of her friends, the details of her struggles, and ask about them with sincerity. But in the final months, she noticed he no longer looked up from his phone when she entered the room. When she was unwell, he did not ask if she needed anything. Instead, he continued his routine as if her discomfort was an interruption to be ignored. It was not cruelty, it was indifference. And indifference in love is often more devastating than anger. Effort is not measured only in actions. It is measured in the willingness to step into another's world and meet them there. When that willingness is gone, love becomes skeletal, stripped of its warmth and vitality. Some will try to justify the absence of effort with words. I'm just tired, I'm busy, I have too much on my plate. And yes, life can be demanding. But love, when real, always finds a way to assert itself, even in the smallest gestures. A tired hand can still reach out. A busy mind can still remember to send a simple note. The danger of accepting convenience in place of effort is that it normalizes neglect. You begin to lower your expectations, convincing yourself that you are asking for too much when, in truth, you are only asking for what love naturally gives. Over time, this self-deception erodes your self-worth. You start believing that your needs are a burden, that you should be satisfied with whatever scraps of attention are offered. But love is not about settling for less than reciprocity. It is about two people meeting each other with equal willingness to give, to notice, to care. When effort disappears, it is not only the actions that are missing. It is the intention, the emotional investment that once lived behind them. A relationship built on convenience is not truly a relationship at all. It is an arrangement in which one person's needs are prioritized only when they align with the other's comfort. And such arrangements are fragile, for they lack the resilience that real love provides. Without effort, there is nothing to hold you together in moments of strain, no reservoir of goodwill built from daily acts of care. In the end, the measure of love is not in words spoken, but in the consistent willingness to act. When someone values you, they will find ways, small, imperfect human ways, to let you know. When they no longer do, you will feel it not just in the absence of grand gestures, but in the absence of those quiet, ordinary moments that once made you feel cherished. And though it may be painful to admit, the absence of effort is often the clearest truth the heart will ever be given. There is a kind of intimacy that transcends the visible, a quiet art of perceiving what cannot be said aloud. When love is alive, it sharpens our perception of another's inner world. We learn to read their silences, to hear the tone beneath their words, to notice the faintest tremor in their expression. It is as if the heart grows eyes of its own, seeing not just the person's outer movements, but the shifting landscapes within them. Someone who truly loves you will recognize the shadow behind your smile, the heaviness in your step, the way your voice dips when you are holding back a truth. They will notice these things not because you demand their attention, but because their care draws them naturally toward your depths. When love fades, this subtle perception dims. They may still acknowledge your outer world, ask about your day, comment on your schedule, recognize that you have been busy, but they no longer seek entry into your inner one. They do not lean closer when they sense you are hiding pain. They do not pause to celebrate your joy as if it were their own. Your inner weather, once something they eagerly tuned into, becomes background noise, acknowledged only in passing or ignored altogether. At first, you might not notice the change. They still speak to you, still participate in the routines of life together, and so it is easy to believe nothing has shifted. But over time, the absence of their emotional curiosity becomes unmistakable. You begin to realize that while they may know what you are doing, they no longer know how you are being. Your thoughts, your fears, your moments of wonder, all the things that make you more than a collection of tasks are no longer invited into the shared space between you. This neglect of the inner world is not always deliberate. Sometimes it begins as a slow drift, born of distraction, stress, or complacency, but when it persists, it signals something deeper, a withdrawal of emotional investment. Love, in its truest form, compels us to inhabit each other's inner lives, to treat them as places worth exploring and understanding. When that impulse disappears, it leaves behind an emptiness far more painful than the absence of physical affection, for it means the person is no longer reaching toward the essence of who you are. I once heard a woman speak of the moment she knew her marriage had become hollow. She had achieved something deeply personal, something she had worked toward quietly for years. It was not an achievement that would make headlines or earn applause from the world, but it was one that carried profound meaning for her. When she told her husband, he glanced up briefly from his phone, muttered "That's nice," and returned to the screen. It was not the brevity of the words that pierced her. It was the absence of recognition, the absence of stepping into her joy as if it mattered. She realized in that moment that she was no longer a living presence in his emotional universe. She had become a distant satellite, moving through her own orbit, unseen and unacknowledged. When love is alive, your pain weighs on them and your joy lifts them. They cannot help but respond to the shifts in your inner state, because they are attuned to it as part of themselves. But when love grows cold, that attunement dissolves. You can be celebrating a quiet victory or battling a silent struggle, and they will remain untouched. They may still offer polite words, but their energy will not follow. The shared emotional space, once vibrant with mutual recognition, becomes barren. This erosion is often more devastating than conflict. Arguments, for all their discomfort, can still signify that two people care enough to engage, to push against each other in search of understanding. But when someone stops seeing your inner world, they stop engaging entirely. The bridge between you collapses, not in a storm of anger, but in the slow decay of indifference, and indifference, though quieter, is far colder than rage. What makes this loss so disorienting is that the outer framework of the relationship may still appear intact. You may still share a home, eat meals together, make plans for the future, but without that mutual inhabiting of each other's inner spaces, these routines become hollow. The life you are living together becomes one of parallel tracks rather than a shared path. You are no longer co-authors of the same story. You are merely characters who happen to occupy the same pages. To stop seeing someone's inner world is, in a way, to stop loving them. Love requires more than proximity. It requires the willingness to witness and be witnessed. It asks us to stay curious about the evolving landscapes of the other's mind and heart. Without that curiosity, the relationship becomes stagnant, for people are not static beings. Our fears shift, our hopes evolve, our understanding of ourselves deepens. If the person beside us no longer seeks to know these shifts, they are not truly beside us. They are beside a version of us that no longer exists. It is tempting, when faced with this kind of emotional withdrawal, to try to force your inner world into their awareness. You may share more, explain more, seek their attention with greater urgency, hoping to reignite the bond. Sometimes this works, if the drift was unintentional, and the love is still present, but dormant. But if the absence persists, you must face the painful truth. They no longer wish to dwell in your inner spaces, and that is not a truth you can change by will alone. The most profound intimacy is not built on constant excitement or perfect harmony. It is built on the steady commitment to truly see each other. When that commitment is broken, love cannot remain whole. You can go through the motions indefinitely, but your soul will know, and if you ignore that knowing, you risk losing not only the relationship, but also the parts of yourself that flourish only when they are seen. This is why the moment you realize someone has stopped seeing your inner world is both heartbreaking and clarifying. It strips away the illusions of closeness and forces you to confront the reality of where you stand. It asks you to decide whether you will accept a love that looks real on the outside but is empty on the inside, or whether you will seek a connection in which your inner life is not just tolerated but cherished. For to be truly loved is to be truly seen, not just in the light of your successes, but in the shadows of your struggles, in the quiet between moments when there is nothing to offer but yourself. There is a peculiar ache that emerges when you realize you are lonelier beside someone than you ever were in solitude. It is not the silence of being alone. It is the silence that grows like a shadow between two people who once shared warmth. You sit together at the same table, perhaps even share the same bed, yet there is an invisible wall that neither of you crosses any more. Words, if they come, are perfunctory. Gestures, if they occur, feel rehearsed. You may laugh together at the same television show, but it is not the laughter that draws two souls closer. It is the laughter that echoes off cold stone. The room is not empty, but the connection is. True connection is never about bodies occupying the same space. It is about hearts and minds inhabiting the same emotional reality. You can be separated by oceans from someone who loves you, and yet feel them in every breath, every thought, every small decision you make in the day. Conversely, you can be inches away from someone whose heart has already drifted to a far offshore, and the distance will feel infinite. That is the cruelty of a dying love. It is not loud, not always explosive. More often it withers quietly, replacing intimacy with habit, warmth with politeness, and presence with absence disguised as routine. I have seen couples walking hand in hand, yet both lost in their own private worlds, tethered by a sense of duty or the fear of change rather than genuine affection. In such moments, the hand you hold is no longer a bridge. It is a reminder of the gap. The touch is there, but the electricity is gone. This is why loneliness in the presence of someone you love cuts deeper than solitude. It confronts you with the truth that love's absence is not marked merely by physical departure, but by the withering of emotional presence. Many cling to such relationships because the thought of being alone terrifies them. They tell themselves at least they're here. But what they fail to see is that proximity without connection does not heal the soul, it starves it. It is like drinking seawater when you are thirsty. The form suggests nourishment, but it only deepens the need. Emotional intimacy cannot be replaced by physical nearness, and shared walls cannot replace shared hearts. I once spoke with a man who had stayed in such a relationship for nearly a decade. He said the breaking point wasn't a fight nor a betrayal. It was a simple Sunday morning. He was reading in the living room and his partner was in the kitchen. There was no tension, no anger, no obvious conflict. But as he sat there, he realized that they had gone weeks without a single meaningful conversation, without truly looking at each other in the eyes. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the silence of strangers politely avoiding one another. In that moment, he understood that love was no longer alive between them, and that staying would mean choosing a slow emotional death over the unknown. Loneliness with someone is more dangerous than loneliness alone, because it erodes your sense of worth. It makes you question whether you are too demanding, too sensitive, too flawed to be seen and heard. It conditions you to accept scraps of attention as if they were a feast, and slowly you begin to shrink yourself to fit the confines of their dwindling interest. You laugh less, you share less, you dream less, until you are merely coexisting, hoping that proximity might someday spark connection again. But without mutual desire, without the active choice to nurture love, that spark does not return. Love is a living thing. It breathes, it needs tending, it requires the courage to reach for the other even when the weight of life's demands press in. When someone no longer makes that reach, the bond begins to wither. And while two people may still sit together in the same space, the relationship has already moved into the realm of arrangement rather than connection. It is like a tree that still stands tall but is hollow inside, outwardly present, inwardly gone. The tragedy is that many do not recognize this form of loneliness until it has consumed them. They keep showing up, cooking meals, making plans, maintaining the outward structure of a relationship, but they are living beside someone rather than with them. And in doing so, they deny themselves the depth of love and connection that every human soul longs for. If you find yourself in such a place, feeling more alone with someone than without them, it is not an indictment of your worth, but a signal of the truth. It means that the bridge between you has crumbled, and no amount of standing on opposite shores will bring you closer unless both hearts choose to rebuild. The human spirit can endure solitude, but it withers under the weight of being unseen by those closest to us. Loneliness in the presence of another is the clearest sign that the love which once bound you has loosened its grip. And the most courageous act you can take is to face that truth, not with bitterness, but with the quiet resolve to seek a life where your presence is met with presence, your voice with listening, and your love with love in return. When you notice these signs, do not convince yourself that you are imagining them. The heart does not lie, and while it may be tempting to cling to the hope that things will change, remember that love cannot be forced into existence. Your worth is not determined by someone's inability to love you. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is to walk away, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself. When you release what is no longer real, you make space for what is. In the end, love is not meant to be guessed at. When it's there, you will feel it without doubt, and when it's gone, you will notice, clearly, painfully, but also truthfully, and truth, even when it hurts, will set you free.